I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am, laying it all out because I need to get it off my chest. My name's Dave, and I've been married to Lisa for about 5 years now. We met in college, seemed like a pretty normal relationship, fun, easy, and honestly, I thought we were solid. She was smart, beautiful, and I was crazy about her. We started a small podcast about relationship advice, which took off a little bit, enough to keep us afloat and, more importantly, to give us something to bond over. It was our thing, our little project, and I genuinely thought it brought us closer. But to be honest, lately, things weren't great. Lisa had been acting weird. She'd get snippy over little things, brush off my questions, and hang around her phone more than usual. Nothing obvious, but I'd catch her in small lies, little things about where she was going or who she was talking to. She'd always say I was overthinking, that I was paranoid, and she'd throw her usual bitchy attitude when I pressed her. Still, I ignored most of it, thinking maybe she was stressed or just dealing with work. Stuff, I wanted to believe she was faithful. I mean, why wouldn't I? We had a good thing, right? Things started to feel off when I noticed her ignoring my calls more often. She'd leave the room when I tried to talk to her, or she'd change the subject quickly. Then I caught her sneaking out of the house late at night once or twice, which I brushed off as her having a night out with friends. But I wasn't convinced. Something about it felt wrong, like she was hiding something. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I told myself she was just stressed or maybe had a secret hobby, something harmless. Then came the real kicker. Last week, I decided to review the security footage from our studio, the place where we record our podcast. We had cameras set up for security reasons, but I'd never really paid much attention to them. I noticed some unusual visits, people coming by when I wasn't around, some late nights I wasn't aware of. At first, I thought maybe it was just fans or friends, but then I saw her. Lisa was sneaking into the studio late at night with a man I didn't recognize. They were acting intimate, touching, whispering. I froze. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe it. I was blindsided. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. The man was someone I'd heard her mention once or twice, a sponsor, a guy named Mark who was funding our show. He's an older guy, kind of sleazy, but I never thought Lisa would cheat on me with him. I mean, she always acted like she hated him, said he was gross. But there she was, sneaking around, doing God knows what. The realization hit me hard. The person funding our show, the one I trusted to be a partner in our little venture, had been sleeping with my wife behind my back. I kept replaying that footage in my head over and over, trying to make sense of how I missed all the signs, how she lied so effortlessly, how she could betray me like that after everything we built together. And that's when it hit me. Reality was not what I thought it was. My wife, Lisa, had been lying to me from the start. All those little lies, all those excuses, they were just cover-ups for something much uglier. I was angry but mostly hurt, like a knife straight through the chest. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I was going to have to plan this carefully. I couldn't just yell and freak out. I needed to get her to admit it, to see her true face when she realized I knew. I didn't have all the details yet, but I was already brewing my plan. I wanted her to see that I was not a fool, that I'd find out everything. That's where I'm at now. Sitting in the quiet of my home, replaying that footage, trying to figure out how this all went so wrong. How my wife, my partner, turned out to be everything I thought she hated: bitchy, lying, selfish, and willing to cheat with the very man whose money supports our dreams. I'm hurt, I'm angry, and I'm starting to see how deep the betrayal goes. I'll tell you what I'm planning next, but first, I need to get my head straight. This isn't just about catching her, it's about what's left after I do. So after watching that footage, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. Lisa was always bitchy. Yeah, but I never thought she'd cheat on me with Mark, of all people. That guy's sleazy. He's one of those guys who thinks he's clever, always flirting, always trying to buy his way into things. And Lisa, she's not exactly innocent. She's got a sharp tongue, she loves lying her ass off when she gets caught in a lie. But this was next level, seeing her sneaking into that studio, whispering with him like they were the only two people in the world. It was like a punch to the gut. The worst part, I never suspected. Honestly, I had no inkling she was capable of doing something so vile. Sure, she was bitchy, she threw tantrums, lied about little things, but I always waved it off as her just being difficult or stressed about our show about life. I was busy trying to build a career and keep her happy, and I thought that was enough. Turns out it was. She was hiding this side of herself, this sneaky, manipulative side, and I was too blind to see it. The first thing I did was go back and review more footage, trying to connect the dots. I watched the security clips. From nights I was out of town for podcast stuff, and I found more visits, some of her meeting Mark in the studio. Sometimes with that, I'm just here to check the equipment face she always threw on when I walked in early. She'd act like she was working late, but I knew better now. That sneaking around, the late-night visits, the secretive texts, they weren't just innocent, and they weren't just about business or some stupid hobby she kept claiming. I was boiling with anger. I wanted to confront her, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. This wasn't going to be a simple "did you sleep with Mark" kind of talk. No, I needed her to slip up, to admit everything without realizing I had proof. For days I kept quiet, watching her behave the way she always did, bitchy, dismissive, quick to lie. I could tell she knew I was onto her, or maybe she just sensed I was angry because she started getting even more defensive. That's when I decided I'd catch her off guard. One night I decided to set a trap. I left my phone in my desk drawer, set up a voice recorder disguised as a pen, and pretended to be out of town for a few days. I told her I was traveling for work, but the truth was, I was just waiting for her to slip up again. I knew she'd be desperate to keep her lies straight, and I wanted her to say something incriminating. That night, I stayed hidden in the living room, listening as she met with Mark again, whispering, giggling, touching each other's arms like they were teenagers. I heard her say she couldn't wait to see him again, and I felt my stomach turn cold. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I didn't want her to keep sneaking around anymore. I wanted her to see that I knew every dirty detail. I flipped the script. The next day, I confronted her, not with yelling, but with a calm, cold rage I'd never really shown before. I told her I'd been watching the footage, that I knew she was sleeping with Mark, that I knew she was lying about everything. Her face twisted in anger, then panic. She started throwing around her usual lies, saying I was paranoid, that I was ruining everything for no reason, that I should just forget about it. She spat. "You're just jealous because I don't want your boring ass anymore," before storming out of the room. The thing is, her reaction was exactly what I expected. She's a bitch, no doubt about it. She's good at hiding stuff, but not good enough. Her lies were thin, her excuses hollow. I could see her trying to play the victim, but her face gave her away. She was scared, guilty, trying to pretend she was. I knew I had her cornered now, and I wasn't about to let her worm her way out. I felt a strange mix of rage, betrayal, and sadness. It's like everything I believed in, everything we built, was just a lie. In that moment, I realized I was done. Done with the lies, with the sneaking around, with pretending everything was fine. I didn't want to be part of a relationship where I was constantly doubting, constantly second-guessing. It was time to decide what I was going to do. I sat down on the couch, took a deep breath, and thought about my next move. I knew I couldn't stay with her. She'd broken everything between us. Trust was gone, and I didn't see how I could rebuild it. I had to think about whether I wanted to fight for the marriage or just walk away and let her deal with her own mess. But before I could even process all that, she came back into the room, furious now, all her usual bitchiness turned up to 11. "You're crazy," she sneered. "You've got no proof, you're just making shit up. You're paranoid like always, you're insecure. Maybe I want someone who actually cares about me, not some pathetic little podcast guy who's obsessed with snooping." That was her way of trying to gaslight me, I guess, but I wasn't having it. I looked her straight in the eye and told her that I knew everything, about Mark, about her lies, about her sneaking around. And she looked like she'd just been slapped. The bitchy mask cracked for a second, and I saw her panic. That was enough for me. I knew I had to get out, to start over, to stop being the fool she thought I was. I'm still processing all of it, honestly. It's like waking up from a nightmare you didn't even realize you were in. I thought I was in a good place, that I was with someone I could trust. Turns out I was just blind. I learned that sometimes the people you love the most can turn out to be the ones who hurt you the worst. I don't know what's next, but I do know one thing: I won't let her or Mark ruin me. I'll get through this, even if it kills me. And if I could give one piece of advice to anyone out there, trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the signs. Because once it's all out in the open, there's no going back. After that confrontation, I knew I had to buckle down and figure out what my next move was. The realization that Lisa had been cheating on me with Mark, the very sponsor who kept our podcast afloat, hit me like a freight train. I'd spent days replaying everything in my mind, trying to piece together how I'd missed all the signs. The woman I thought I knew, the one I'd trusted with my life, was capable of sneaking around behind my back and lying her ass off. It was a gut punch. At first I was just furious, the kind of furious that makes your chest tighten and your fists clench. I wanted to tear her apart, to make her feel as small and betrayed as I felt. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't fix anything. If I wanted real answers, I needed to approach this carefully. So I started planning my strategy. I wasn't going to confront her again without proof, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into feeling guilty for catching her. I had to make her admit everything on her own. I decided to go back to the security footage, but this time I wasn't just watching. I set up a plan to catch her in the act if she tried to deny it. I placed a hidden camera in the studio, right near the door. I kept my phone close, ready to record anything suspicious. I wanted her to think I was out of town, that I wasn't watching. That's when she really slipped up. She started acting even more reckless. She came home late, smelling like perfume I'd never seen on her before. She was louder, more aggressive. With her lies, I could tell she was trying to cover her tracks, but she was also careless. One night I decided to stay home and see what she'd do. I pretended to be asleep, lying in bed while I kept my ear tuned to the living room. And that was when I heard her sneaking around again. Her footsteps, the muffled whispers, the zipper of her purse. I peeked out from behind the door and saw her slipping out of the house with her coat on, a bag over her shoulder. I snapped a quick picture with my phone, just enough proof to make her realize I was serious. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and disgust. Satisfaction that I was finally catching her, disgust at what she was doing behind my back. The next morning I confronted her again. This time I had the pictures, the footage, everything. I told her I knew about her and Mark, that I'd seen everything. Her response: she spun her usual lies, acting like I was crazy, accusing me of stalking her, calling me paranoid. She said, "You're just jealous because I'm finally getting what I want. Maybe I don't want some boring podcast guy. Maybe I want someone who's actually alive, who cares about me." That's when I lost it. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. She was so good at lying, so good at pretending she was the victim. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I told her she needed to pack her bags and leave, that I wasn't going to be played like some fool. I looked her dead in the eyes and told her this was the end of our marriage. That I'd had enough of her lies, her sneaking around, her pretending to be someone she's not. I was done. The woman I loved, or thought I loved, turned out to be manipulative, selfish, and utterly incapable of honesty. Her bitchy attitude was just her way of trying to control everything, but now it was clear she was just trying to hide her own shame. As she stormed out of the house, cursing and yelling, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with heartbreak. I knew I'd never trust her again, not after what I'd seen. And deep down, I realized that I deserved better, someone who wouldn't lie, cheat, and manipulate me for their own pleasure. I sat down and took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, trying not to lose it. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I wasn't going to let her win. I'd start rebuilding somehow. Maybe alone, maybe with someone who actually deserved my trust. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I packed her things myself, feeling like I was stripping away the last remnants of what I thought we had. Every little detail about her felt contaminated now. Her scent, her touch, her words. I kept thinking about Mark, that sleazy bastard, and how he thought he was so clever. That man had no idea how much damage he'd done. I didn't plan on just letting this slide. No way. I was going to make sure he paid for what he did, even if I had to do it quietly and cleverly. But for now, I just needed to breathe. I needed to process how someone I loved could turn out to be so cold, so selfish. I'd never been this broken before, never felt so humiliated. I looked at the flickering light of my empty house and realized I was at a crossroads. I could let this destroy me, or I could pick up the pieces and move on. Deep down, I knew I'd choose the latter, but it wasn't going to be easy. Not at all. Trust, once broken like this, is nearly impossible to repair, and the scars this betrayal left, they're going to take some serious time to heal. The aftermath hit me harder than I expected. After she left, I stayed alone in that empty house, staring at the walls I'd thought knew her, knew us. Every corner, every piece of furniture suddenly felt like a lie. I kept replaying everything. The sneaking out, her biting lies, that damn footage, Mark's greasy smile in the background. It all felt like a massive betrayal, not just of me but of everything I believed in. I was angry at her for being so cold, for lying to my face, and I was even angrier at myself for not seeing it sooner. How could I have been so blind? I spent the first few days in a fog, trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't. I'd catch myself thinking about how to get even, how to punish Mark, how to make Lisa regret everything she'd done. But honestly, I knew that wouldn't bring any real closure. That kind of revenge might feel good in the moment, but it wouldn't fix the damage she'd already done. No, what I needed was clarity, closure that came from understanding, from finally accepting what had happened and deciding how I was going to move forward. I realized I had to start by gathering more evidence, even if I'd already seen enough to know the truth. I wanted to be sure, to have concrete proof I could use if I decided to take legal or formal steps. I went to a private investigator, paid him to dig into Mark and Lisa's activities. I wanted to see if they'd been doing this longer than I knew, if there was someone else involved, or if she'd been lying about everything. The investigator found out that Mark's meetings with Lisa weren't just a one-time thing. They'd been going on for months: secret dinners, late-night meetings, even trips out of town. It was like she'd been living this double life, and I was just the idiot who never saw it coming. That whole process was a brutal reality check. It hit me that she'd been carefully hiding her lies, and I'd been too blind, or maybe just too hopeful, to see it. The woman I married, the woman I'd built a life with, was deep in a web of lies. She lied about her feelings, about her loyalty, about everything that mattered. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for thinking she cared about me. But at the same time, I was angry, furious that she'd thrown everything we had into the trash for some sleazy affair with Mark. I started to think about what I'd do next. Honestly, part of me wanted just to cut her out completely, to pack up her things, change the locks, and move on. But another part of me, something I didn't want to admit at first, was still holding onto a flicker of hope that I could salvage some dignity, some self-respect. I didn't want to be just another guy who got played. I also knew that I deserved better than this girl who could lie so easily, who thought she could cheat behind my back and get away with it. So I made a decision. I was going to confront her one last time, but not with anger, at least not just anger. I wanted her to look me in the eye and own up. I wanted her to realize that her lies had consequences. I knew she was good at spinning stories, so I planned to record that conversation. I wanted undeniable proof that she'd betrayed me, not just my words or accusations. I set it up carefully, knew when she'd come to pick up some of her things, arranged for a friend to be nearby, just in case. When she showed up, her face was full of that same bitchy attitude she always had. She sneered at me, acting like she was the victim, clutching her purse as if she owned the house. I stood there, calm but cold, and told her I knew everything. I told her I had proof of her affair with Mark, that I knew she'd been lying for months, sneaking around behind my back. She started to deny it, of course, throwing out her usual insults. "You're paranoid. You're just jealous. I don't know what you're talking about." But I calmly pulled out the recordings, played them right there in front of her. Her face drained of color. Her bitchy attitude melted into pure panic. That moment was a major turning point. She tried to spin her lies, to say it was all a misunderstanding, but I wasn't buying it. I told her she'd crossed every line, betrayed me in ways I couldn't forgive. I told her I was done with her lies, her manipulation, her sneaking around. I told her I didn't want her back, that I didn't want anything to do with her anymore, that I was better off alone than with someone who could so easily destroy everything we built. Watching her try to deny it all, knowing I had her on tape, was oddly satisfying. For the first time, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't the fool anymore. After she left, I just sat there for a while. The house was eerily quiet. I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I was free, but I also felt like I'd lost a part of myself. That betrayal cut deep, and I knew I'd carry this scar for a long time. But I also knew I had taken the first step towards healing. I had to accept that the woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who lied, cheated, and cared only about her own selfish needs. I realized I'd spent too much time blaming myself or trying to fix things that weren't fixable. Now, it was about reclaiming my life, one day at a time. The most surprising thing, I started thinking about why I let all this happen. I mean, I was never perfect, but I'd been so focused on fixing the relationship that I overlooked the signs. I was too busy trying to keep her happy, trying to be a good husband, that I ignored the red flags. I learned something important. You can't save a sinking ship by ignoring the leaks. If your gut tells you something's wrong, don't brush it aside. Pay attention. Because if you don't, someone else might come along and do what Lisa did, take everything you have just because they think they can get away with it. Now I'm trying to put the pieces back together. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'll never trust blindly again. I'll be more cautious, more aware. And as much as it hurts to lose her, I feel like I've finally started to take back control. I'll rebuild my life one step at a time. And for anyone out there going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't let the betrayal pile up until it's too late. You deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. Don't settle for anything less. The days that followed were a whirlwind of reflection and decision-making. I spent hours just sitting in silence, trying to process how someone I loved could betray me so completely. I kept replaying those moments, her sneaking out, the recordings I'd made, the lies she told, and each time it felt like a punch in the gut all over again. But I also knew I had to act. Sitting around feeling sorry for myself wasn't going to fix anything. I had to start rebuilding, even if it was just a little at a time. My first move was to cut ties with Mark entirely. I figured if he thought I was just going to roll over and accept his sleazy affair with my wife, he was dead wrong. I hired a private investigator to get more dirt on him. What else he'd been doing, who else he'd been with, how deep his connections went. Turns out Mark had been involved with more women than I realized, all of them thinking he was some kind of relationship guru, when really he was just a manipulative predator. The investigator found out that Mark had a long history of affairs and that he'd been using his influence to get close to women for years. That made me furious, not just at Lisa but at him too. It was clear he'd been using her, probably saw her as another conquest, another notch in his belt. I also started focusing on myself. I went back to the gym, threw myself into my work and tried to keep my mind from spiraling. That took a lot of effort, especially on nights when the house was silent and all I could hear was my own thoughts. I realized I'd been ignoring my own needs for too long, trying to hold everything together for her. Now, it was about me. I didn't want to be weak anymore. I wanted to be strong enough to walk away from this mess, to rebuild my life from the ground up. One of the hardest parts was telling my close friends what had happened. I didn't want to be the guy everyone felt sorry for, but I also knew I couldn't carry this burden alone. I sat down with a few trusted friends, told them everything, about the affair, the footage, the confrontation, everything. Their reactions were mixed. Some were angry, some just shook their heads, but all of them told me I deserved better. That gave me the courage to start thinking about what I really wanted. A clean break, a fresh start, and a vow to never again ignore my instincts. I knew I had to be practical, so I started making arrangements. I talked to a lawyer about divorce options, about freezing accounts and protecting myself financially. I didn't want her to take everything or leave me on the hook for anything she might try to hide. I also made plans to move out once I found a new place. I needed distance, physical and emotional, to heal. As I packed up her things, I felt a strange sense of closure, like I was finally freeing myself from her grip. It was a long, painful process, but I knew it was necessary. Throughout all this, I had to confront the hardest truth, that I'd loved someone who was fundamentally dishonest. I'd given her my trust, my time, my hopes, and she'd thrown it all away for some sleazy affair. That realization stung worse than anything else. I felt angry, humiliated, but also oddly relieved. I no longer had to pretend that everything was okay. I could finally see her for what she was, a manipulative liar who cared only about herself. But I also learned something valuable from all of this. I learned that I had been too willing to overlook the red flags, to justify her behavior because I loved her. Love isn't enough if the other person doesn't respect you enough to be honest. I should have listened to my gut from the start. Instead of making excuses, I should have seen the signs and acted sooner. Maybe then, I wouldn't be sitting here now, picking up the pieces. In the end, I decided to focus on moving forward. I started seeing a counselor to help process all the pain and betrayal. It's been a rough ride, but I'm starting to see that I'm stronger than I thought. The betrayal didn't break me, it's just made me more cautious, more aware of what I deserve. I know I'll heal eventually. And I know that someday I'll love again, but only with someone who's honest, loyal, and worthy of my trust. For anyone out there in a similar situation, don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts no matter how painful it is. If someone is lying, cheating, or sneaking around, it's a sign that they don't respect you enough. Cut your losses, gather your strength, and get out before you get more hurt. Because at the end of the day, you're worth more than someone who treats you like an afterthought. I'm still healing, but I'm damn sure not letting this bastardized version of love define me. I'll come out of this stronger, I have to. Looking back now, I realize how much this whole ordeal has changed me. At first, I was just devastated, completely shattered by the betrayal. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to trust again. But over time, I learned to pick up the pieces, even if some are still jagged edges. The betrayal was brutal, yes, but it also forced me to confront my own weaknesses, how I ignored the signs, how I let her manipulate me, how I kept hoping things would change. That's a hard lesson, but one I needed. I also learned that sometimes love isn't enough. No matter how much you care, if someone isn't honest, if they don't respect you enough to be truthful, then the relationship is doomed. I wasted too much time making excuses for her, thinking she was stressed or that she'd change or that she was just having a rough patch. But the truth is, she chose to cheat, to lie, to manipulate. And there's no excuse for that. No matter how much I loved her, she chose her own selfishness over us. Now I focus on rebuilding myself. I've started going out more, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, and taking care of my mental health. I've realized that life goes on, even after something so devastating. It's not about revenge anymore, it's about reclaiming my happiness. I've learned to trust my intuition, to listen to what my gut is telling me, and to walk away from anything that doesn't feel right. Because at the end of the day, that's what saved me, learning to listen to myself and not ignore the red flags. I've also become more cautious. In my relationships, I don't rush into trusting someone new, and I definitely don't ignore the signs if things start feeling off. If someone shows even a hint of dishonesty, I cut it off immediately. The pain of betrayal is too deep to ignore, and I refuse to go through that again. I want someone who respects me, who's honest, and who's willing to build something real. I've learned that love isn't about ignoring the warnings or convincing yourself it's just a phase. It's about honesty, loyalty, and respect. One thing I want to say to anyone reading this: don't let betrayal define you. Yes, it hurts like hell, and yes, it feels like your world is crumbling. But those feelings are temporary. You are stronger than the pain, and you will come out the other side. Trust takes time to rebuild, and sometimes you have to accept that some wounds will never fully heal. But that doesn't mean you have to stay stuck in the past. You deserve better, and eventually you'll find it. For me, this whole experience has been a bitter but necessary lesson. I still get angry thinking about what she did, but I also feel a weird sense of relief. I no longer have to pretend everything's okay when it's not. I can finally move forward with clarity. I can look in the mirror and honestly say I did everything I could, and I refuse to be a victim of her lies anymore. That's the real victory. So, if you're going through something similar, remember, betrayal hurts, but it doesn't have to define your future. Trust your instincts, protect your heart, and don't be afraid to walk away from what's toxic. You're better than someone who lies, cheats, and manipulates. And in the end, the only thing that matters is your own happiness and peace. Keep fighting for that, no matter how hard it gets, because you're worth it.